where are the areas where decisions are difficult or slow or inaccurate? And because AI is primarily for supply chains for making better decisions faster.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Supply Chain Unchained. This is the podcast where we discuss the entire supply chain all the way from flyer, freight forwarding, and right down to the final consumer. Our aim with these podcasts is to give you insights and information that you can use everyday work. Hopefully will make you a better supply chain professional for having listened to them. My name is Greg Amanatidis. I am the Director of Marketing here at Navia. My guest today is Elton Brown, consultant at DMS and the author or creator of supply chain maturity score.com. He's been in the industry for almost 30 years now. Today's episode will center around AI and how it can be utilized in supply chains. But let's start off with yourself, Elton. Tell us a bit about your background, how DMS has evolved over its lifetime, and maybe just a little bit about the supply chain maturity assessment, if you can.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for having me. And I fell into supply chain at the age of 21 straight from university, having been a computer science and maths nerd. Didn't know what supply chain was and discovered it was solving problems every day. So stuck with it, fortunately, for nearly 30 years now, and have been with DMS, which is Demand Management Systems, for 5 years. DMS has been around since the late 80s, which was mostly providing supply chain planning technology to mid-market and enterprise level organizations. But nowadays we've evolved into representing multiple technologies for businesses that want to evolve their planning and optimization functions in their supply chain. And at the University of Sydney, I'm fortunate enough to be able to lecture on intelligent supply chains and the applications of AI in supply chains, with a focus lately, because it's such a hot topic, on sustainability, but also resilience. So resilient supply chains. And that's lecturing supply chain practitioners and professionals after hours online with the University Business School. So personally, I also learn a lot in that. It's a lot of fun.
I can imagine. That's awesome. Good for you and for the students. Let's start with how decisions get made. So from in your experience and working with clients, let's break down how supply chain decisions get made and should be made, and maybe where there can be some room for improvement in that process.
Yeah, decision science is a science in itself that has a bit of focus. And actually, that's one of the reasons we put together the supply chain maturity score.com, which is exactly that address if anyone wants to go there, which is free. It only takes 5 minutes, and it allows practitioners to assess across 5 attributes like people, process, technology, but also collaboration and strategy. Where are there opportunities or there gaps or weaknesses? And that allows them to focus on, well, where can I maybe improve my decision making? But decisions actually, if you think about all the way from freight forwarding through to customer fulfillment, there are thousands of decisions being made every day to optimize the supply chain end to end. And unfortunately, decisions are made on gut feel, or they're made on spreadsheets, or they're made on poor handoffs from one person or one department or one organization in the supply chain to the next person, department or organization, because we lose context, or when we're not connecting our systems, or we're not basing our decisions on the same assumptions. And so we have all of these suboptimal decisions being made all the way through the supply chain, and it's full of waste. And I'm on a bit of a mission to help organizations work out how to make better decisions more easily and with more accuracy.
You mentioned there's supply chain decisions being made off of a spreadsheet. The argument that comes to mind is, isn't that a good way of making a decision?
There is a benefit, because often it's based on looking at what happened in the past. And a couple of decades ago, that was a really good approach, and that was the best way to it. And that was when we lived in a world that was very stable compared to what it is now. But because there is so much uncertainty, how do we build in what we think might happen in the future to come up with a forward decision that has greater resilience or agility in it? And that's very hard to do if we're looking backwards.
That's actually the point. So you're saying basically spreadsheets and data are only retrospective and they don't take into account where the world might go or where supply chains might go in the future. So you kind of really only got not half the equation, but only part of the equation.
Yeah, transaction systems and spreadsheets are really good at providing descriptive data. Where am I now and what's happened in the past? But as soon as we want to move into diagnostic for root cause analysis, predictive for what will happen in the future, and then prescriptive for tell me what to do, all of those need to come from intelligent systems that use typically algorithms to get there. So it's falls into the topic of connected planning. How do I connect my decisions across, not necessarily systems or departments, but across horizons? So I make a decision at the strategic level that I'm going to use this freight forwarder, or I'm going to buy from this supplier. I make tactical decisions that I'm going to buy this much this month, or I'm going to use this transport mode for this product category. We make operational decisions around I'm going to approve that order, I'm going to expedite this one, I'm going to substitute this product. So day-to-day decisions. And when we make those micro decisions for the operational level, they need to align with our tactical decisions, which need to align with our strategic decisions. And if they're not, we have disconnected planning and our supply chain is in disarray and there's a lot of waste.
A big problem that you probably see is where decisions at the strategic, tactical and operational level don't really marry up, and then I guess you can't really achieve the goal that you're aiming for.
Absolutely.
Just touching back on that piece around predicting and you said prediction and prescription. Talk to me about that. What's the difference between those two?
It's like there's an evolution in anything, and I'm a fan of categorizing because it allows us to determine where we are, because that gives us an opportunity to determine where we should go next. And so if we look at the kind of information we're consuming as anyone in supply chain to try and make an effective decision, typically in the past we've looked at reports, two-dimensional reports that tell us what's happened. What's my sales report? What's my deliveries report? What's my fulfillment, my DIFOT, SIFOT? All the acronyms. And that is good descriptive data, and it's an absolute must-have. And then we can build on that to say, well, give me my diagnostic analytics, which tell me why this happened. And then we can build on diagnostic to predictive, to tell me what's likely to happen in the future. And the most obvious version of that is a sales forecast. But we also need an inventory projection and a supply plan and a distribution plan and a schedule and a route. And then once we've made all those predictions, we can build on that with a prescriptive analytics or a prescriptive plan that says, actually, these are all of the orders you should release now. These are the ones you should cancel. These are the ones you should expedite. This is the supplier you should use for this one. So they're all decision recommendations based on optimization so that as humans, we can start managing the bigger picture and not have to think about all of those smaller decisions.
I like that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but do they marry up similarly in, say, I guess they probably go across all three levels, right? So you could have descriptive at the strategic level, predictive, prescriptive, diagnostic at that level, and then same for tactical and operational as well?
Yes, well said. They certainly do span across all three levels, but the impact that the I guess decision horizon has is what do I want to automate and what do I not want to automate. So when we're down at the operational level, I almost want to automate everything. Just release all my orders, plan all my production orders, approve all of my my fulfillment, but let me manage by exception. The concept of managed by exception is completely flipped when we go to a strategic horizon, because we're not looking at exceptions there at all. We're looking at simulations and scenarios in much longer horizons, much longer time buckets, and it's almost always forward-looking. And so it's almost always going to be predictive and then prescriptive, but we're always intervening as humans and working with the machine to come up with the right plans at that level. So it's really an automation change across those horizons.
Okay, awesome. And then touching on that automation piece, I guess let's talk about AI. Let's maybe start with, what are you seeing across that AI landscape in supply chain? What's been useful right now? What's not? And then if you can, obviously, our customers are interested in the freight forwarding side of things. Where does the freight forwarding piece sit amongst that?
Well, there's still a lot of hype out there, and AI is still a buzzword. It has a lot of value, and it's being used in virtually every industry now for many different reasons. There are so many great use cases, but there are so many failures that we can learn from as well. If we look at the concept of, say, demand sensing, where we're doing a sense and respond process, looking at customer orders to work out, how do I change my plans for how much inventory to deploy, how much to transfer between my warehouses, which customers to fulfill and which not, based on my inventory position. All of those short-term daily decisions associated with demand sensing. AI is perfect for that, because we need to look at different data streams. Multiple data streams means we're making multivariate predictions. And so that also drives inventory optimization, and then signaling of alerts, so AI-based exception management, and then risk management. So there's a big drive for resilient supply chains. One element of resilience is risk management and monitoring. Another big element is designing resilience into your supply chain, but we don't have time for that. But if you look at how AI is used in risk monitoring, generative AI has great applications there, where you can monitor external risks to your supply chain and have alerts real time, so you can intervene days or weeks before these things actually show up in routes, at suppliers, in countries, in war zones, in trade, and in tariffs.
How might someone, if I'm someone listening to this and thinking, how can I do that? How can I look at risks and get AI to help me with risks? What would you tell them?
I would say AI is great for when something is already digitalized, because it needs to be able to run on digital platforms. We need to digitize, and this is a terminology thing universities use, for example. We need to digitize, which means get away from the paper first, and then digitalize, which means connect systems and have value-add processes, and then put AI on the digitalized system. We'll put AI into our platforms. I think the opportunities in freight forwarding are to first get away from paper. Wherever we have paper in the process, we need to digitize our platforms first. And then once everything is digital, then we can start to have value add, such as AI.
Do you see a lot of paper in that freight forwarding space or other spaces at the moment?
I think relative to other areas of the supply chain, certainly freight forwarding is one of the greatest opportunities to move away from paper. There are elements of the supply chain that sit within a country with very specific regulation and very specific systems, and it's very easy to digitalize. But as soon as you start to cross borders, then standards and regulation are much more difficult. And so I would love to see freight forwarding be completely digitized in the next few years, so that all of these areas of supply chain that are already digitalized with AI can start to connect with freight forwarding and start to optimize the supply chain end to end. That's a huge opportunity.
Yeah. It's pretty funny that we're having that discussion in 2026, getting away from paper. It's something that amazes me. Like, in a lot of senses that the freight industry can sometimes lag a little bit in this sense, from a technology perspective. So I guess once everything's digitized, and we start to see the automation of, I guess what you're talking about there is the automation of those operational level tasks, if I'm not mistaken. Once we see that happen, in the next, say, 1 to 3 year medium term landscape, what do you think will come next after that?
Oh, well, once we're all connected and digitalized, there's so much opportunity. You think about, on a big scale, what the internet did for AI and connection. I don't necessarily mean human connection. That's another discussion. But it's like saying, if we could just have all of our supply chains connected, imagine what we could do in terms of optimizing them. And so certainly in the next few years, we're going to be more and more focused on resilience and risk because of the uncertainty that's still around, and also agility for some organizations. We're going to move away from reactive to predictive. There's already been this trend because we've already realized it, particularly since Y2K started this process, but we saw Y2K coming, and a lot of people think it was actually just hype, and it was in some cases. But we've had the GFC, but we've also then had multiple wars. But COVID really made us rethink about design of our supply chains, things like reshoring, nearshoring. And so it's put us in the spotlight, supply chains, in late 2020. We're still in the spotlight because of other external events going on. So resilience and risk and agility are going to be driven by AI. And the types of AI that we were talking about 3 or 4 years ago was generally machine learning algorithms and computer vision and natural language. But nowadays, most of the time we think of generative AI. So if you've used ChatGPT or something similar, then generative AI is very powerful for risk and resilience in supply chain management and monitoring. And I think most organizations will be embracing that within a couple of years.
Yeah. So let's say I'm a supply chain manager or, something like this, and I'm watching this podcast. Maybe I've used ChatGPT. What's one thing I can do to, I guess, kickstart that process for myself, would you say?
Well, think about where's your key problem, so the opportunity. What I don't want anyone to do is think about, where do I use the technology? Because there's a technology discussion and it's more likely to fail. It needs to be a business problem discussion. And so where are the areas where decisions are difficult or slow or inaccurate? And because AI is primarily for supply chains, for making better decisions faster. And so think about that. Maybe it's the area of working out how much to ship. And so is that a system problem? Well, it's a decision problem. What's the system we're using to decide that? Is it a person? Is it a spreadsheet? Okay, well, there's opportunity there if it's one or both of those, because there are AI systems designed for this. If we don't have the budget and the time to go and try a proof of concept on some kind of third-party system to help us plan our shipments, then we can still go and create our own models in generative AI. So we could go to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini, and we could give it data that shows the past, and we could ask it things like, make a prediction for me, tell me what to do here, and you will start to learn how we no longer have deterministic predictions, which is a single number. We have probabilistic outcomes, because the world is probabilistic. Nothing's certain. Even generative AI models are probabilistic. You run the same query tomorrow, you might get the different answer. So it will give you predictions around, well, you should ship this much, but I've only got this much confidence and you should consider that. And what about that? And they're the kind of decisions that we want you to be thinking about in a best of breed technology.
Okay. So just to recap there, so you would start with not, hey, I want to use this technology, let me start using it. You would start with, where are the places where I am making lots of decisions, where I need help making better decisions, and that problem isn't a system problem but a decision-making problem. That is then the opportunity for you to then find the AI solution that fits that, rather than starting with the solution itself.
Perfect. Yeah.
And then once, let's say, for example, I don't have the budget, I might start with something like you said, like a large language model, an LLM, and putting my data into that. I like what you said there. That's interesting about the probabilistic outcomes rather than deterministic. So I might kind of get AI to help me conceptualize what could or might happen. Because I think something that's interesting there is sometimes just being aware of the probability or possibility that something else might happen might help you make a quicker decision in the case that it starts eventuating just because you were aware of it. That's a really good point. And then let's say I do have some budget. What might I do then?
Well, you would seek some expertise and input from a partner, potentially, because there are many experts out there, including DMS, of course, that have a lot of experience on, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and so what are the type of technologies we should apply to it. Once we get to that kind of discussion, then there are always multiple systems then you can evaluate, and that's what we do at DMS is help you with that. But just note that because there are different types of AI, you might think of it very narrow AI as being like basic statistical algorithms that have been around for 50 plus years. You might think of like modern narrow AI as being very specific systems in supply chain that might use machine learning models. And then you might think of generative AI as being using one of the open source or public or private large language models to make more probabilistic predictions. There are many other types of AI as well, and so such as deep learning, particularly if you need graphics and a lot of unstructured data to be analysed. So seek the expert advice, because you can pretty quickly narrow it down to one or two types of AI that you need to make an optimal decision, depending on where you are in the supply chain, and then there'll be a set number of technology providers that can provide that type of AI. There are vendors, of course, that ERP specialists, so enterprise resource planning, and the ERP vendors, it's their job to try and keep up with the specialist vendors. But the only reason we have the specialist vendors in place is because they're always 5 to 10 years ahead of the ERP vendors. It's their job to absolutely do that. So you've got the decision of, do I want to try and do it in my transaction system? Do I want to use a specialist system, or do I build it myself? If you're very unique, you might consider building it yourself, but it's much less common nowadays. And if you're pretty basic and you're just trying to get out of spreadsheets, you could certainly try doing it with your ERP, but it depends on which ERP you have. Some don't even have good planning modules. Some don't have them at all. There's a lot of research out there to help with that.
You mentioned this is something DMS does. I also want to go back to the supply chain maturity score. Tell us what's involved in that. And for someone who fills that score out, goes through that process, what will that help them achieve?
Well, there's a bunch of maturity models that have been used for many years from many providers around the world, and they're generally difficult or expensive. And we wanted it to be free, so people can start the conversation inside their supply chains to say, well, look, here's an area of weakness we should think about. Should we do anything about that? So at supplychainmaturityscore.com, all you need is an email address to use it. You get the instant results that are personalized based on your questions. And those questions are all across those 5 attributes of people, process, technology. But what you don't get in the maturity models around the world generally, which are really important for Australia, are focus on strategy, because our supply chains are often far removed from the rest of the world, and on collaboration, where we must collaborate with our suppliers because we have an oligopoly of retailers that are driving difficult margins and a lot of promotional buying. And we also have very long lead times with our suppliers. So the collaboration downstream with customers and upstream with suppliers is even more important in Australia. So those 5 dimensions are all in there and allow you to see, well, where's our opportunity? But we ran this for a client about 6 weeks ago and said, please share it with everyone involved in supply chain there. They had 18 people fill it out, and we presented the results to them, and it was really interesting to see how some people thought that they were so good in some areas, terrible in others, and it was completely reversed from other people. And we found some trends across functions, and it kind of allowed us to see that actually this department we think don't even understand what the business strategy is. This department don't even know that this other department is actually using technology to try and solve this problem. So it can be a lot of fun.
So the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand. Yeah. Awesome. I think that's pretty much everything. That's really insightful discussion there, Elton. Thank you. We'll go with a bit of a closer. I ask most of my guests this: if there's one piece of advice that you've kind of would want to give to someone who's 30 years before you in their supply chain career, what would that advice be? Pardon me.
Oh, the advice would be to anyone starting out in supply chain now: stick with it. It is absolutely a great place to be. And if you think that AI is coming for our jobs, it's certainly coming for our job descriptions. And so those who are able to use and embrace AI in the right way, especially in supply chain, have a great career ahead of them.
I like it. That's a good sound advice. For those listening, where can they find you and get in touch with you if they would like to?
Thank you. Yeah, find me on LinkedIn, Elton Brown. So linkedin.com/in/Elton Brown, or the DMS website is demandmgmt.com, or you'll find us also at supplychainmaturityscore.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Elton. Really appreciate it. And for everyone watching, we'll be back with another episode soon, giving you more insights.
Thank you, Greg.